What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Combine here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I've been waiting a long time to say this, but finally, guys, college football is back. And today, we will be previewing the biggest games of college football today, all the top-ranked games. We're going to be talking about matchups and prospects for the 2023 NFL Draft. But first, before we get started, I'd like to bring on a guest today. It's a good friend of mine, Nick Price from the ATB Network. Nick, how we doing today, my guy?
Good, man. Good. I woke up this morning, make some breakfast, prep my game day meal for later on, and I'm ready to talk some football.
Really? What you got cooking today?
I mean, man, it's nothing special. Just single guy apartment food, just like little mini like pizzas. I just threw. I found a recipe on TikTok, man. I just
Really?
something cheap and easy.
Really? What is it? What is it?
It's like take like English muffins. You put like marinara sauce, or whatever, and then like cheese and pepperoni, and just put bake in the oven for like 5 minutes. But you can make an abundance of them, keep them on throughout the week. Just something to snack on, I guess.
Oh, that's dope, bro. I got right after the show, once the games kick off at noon, I got burgers that I'll be putting on the grill. So
Ooh.
I am fully prepped to go all out today. But let's go ahead and talk about these previews. And one of the biggest ones today is Cincinnati at Arkansas. And we'll do a quick brief preview of this one. Cincinnati is ranked number 23. Arkansas is ranked number 19. Now, this is a group of 5 team versus an SEC team. The line today has Arkansas -7, over under at 52. How are you liking the lines and the betting predictions about this first off?
I'm not usually much of a betting guy, but I don't know. I mean, from a draft perspective, you got to understand that Cincinnati lost a lot of their team last year, including Desmond Ridder. They're starting Ben Bryant, who's a bit unproven in Group of 5. But I personally, from my own evaluation, I'd like Arkansas here. I mean, I hope KJ Jefferson takes it to another step this year at the quarterback. Granted, they lost Treylon Burks, but they still have some nice pieces. Their offensive line is still relatively intact. Like they brought back Brock. I want to call him Brock Hoffman. It's not Brock. He was the Virginia Tech guy. Point is, they bring about their starting center. And they have, I think they moved like guys like Trey Knox to tight end, who's a really good athletic guy. And then obviously, their defense, they still have Jalen Cattle on.
They're really good safety in Cal.
Really good safety. So I like.
Now, of course, there's big talent losses in several areas for this Bearcats team, but the offensive front, it's still loaded with veterans and good players as well, and especially on the offensive side of the ball. And it should be among the best in the nation at keeping these defenses out of the backfield. But one thing which concerns me a lot is Coach Luke Fickell's comments heading into the Razorback Stadium. This is their first time they were playing in an actual SEC home stadium. And, he admitted that they're not suited to play against a loud SEC home crowd. What do you make about those comments that he's made?
I mean, coming from obviously their Group of 5, they're the biggest team from the Group of 5 from the American Conference. I mean, playing the SEC, it's just a different ballgame altogether. I mean, that's as close as you're going to get to an NFL type of atmosphere in college football. I mean, especially with a historic team like Arkansas. Granted, do I think they have better chances against Arkansas than they will with someone like Alabama, where playing Tuscaloosa is just you're going straight into the Lions Den? Yeah, but I kind of get his sentiment where it's probably very different for them than who they've played the past regularly. So I understand it.
Now, the biggest key in winning this top 25 matchup for the Bearcats is containing Arkansas quarterback KJ Jefferson, and all eyes will be on him this game up against a talented Bearcats defense. And if he performs well, can his draft stock go up today?
I think it's possible. I mean, like I said, granted, Cincinnati lost a good number of people, especially on defense, but they still have plenty of great defenders. So I mean, he has going to have his work cut out for him. I fully expect someone like Arquan Bush or Desean Pace, who we'll talk about later, to be having his number quite a few times. But no, I think it's possible. I think KJ Jefferson, granted, he's not the from my own personal evaluation of him, he's not the greatest thrower of the football. I don't think he has the best overall arm in terms of strength, but I think he does a lot of nice things with his athleticism. Otherwise, he's can make really nice plays out of the backfield when he needs to. He's not someone who I don't think is completely reckless with the football, but I think this year he is a senior, correct? I'm not 100%
He is
sure.
a senior.
Yeah, so I think going into his final year, I think he has all the makings to really take a nice jump because he played well last year. I think he played better last year than I think anyone was expecting. But we'll see. I don't want to make too much of a quick judgment just yet.
So, look, I mean, even if Jefferson doesn't do well, they still have a good offensive line, and the running game should help him out. And the team led the SEC in rushing last year. Cincinnati secondary lost, a lot of NFL talent. They lost Kobe Bryant. They lost Sauce Gardner as well. So the passing efficiency should be there, but there has to be something said about the loss of Treylon Burks to the NFL.
Yes.
And head coach Pittman, he wants to see how good of a receiver Drew Sanders can be. So can KJ Jefferson rely on Drew Sanders?
I think he can rely on him, but I also think he has someone like Jaden Hazelwood is a nice transfer coming to granted. And Hazelwood has kind of had an up and down career so far, but I think as far as talent wise, you could go worse. They also got a guy named Warren Thompson, who I'm excited to see play with more love this season. But I think, like I said, Jefferson is not totally reckless with the football. He can be pretty smart with it. I think he needs to try to build up a good rapport this season because obviously losing someone like Treylon Burks is significant. I mean, he's a first round talent. So like I said, we'll see. But I think Jefferson, from what I've seen on tape last year, I think he has the potential to be very consistent throwing the football this year, especially to someone like Sanders.
Now, as we go away from, Arkansas, we're going to stick in SEC country right now. We're going to talk about arguably the second biggest matchup of the day so far, Oregon versus Georgia. I think the most intriguing and probably most telling matchup in this game is easily going to be how the Oregon offensive line deals with Georgia's defensive line. I mean, the Ducks returned 5 of 6 starters up front, including 3 seniors. And head coach Dan Lanning says it's the best offensive line in the Pac-12. But the Bulldogs have lost all 3 starters along the defensive line, including Trayvon Walker. Jalen Carter, although, is still there, and I believe you may have a matchup that you want to talk about with Jalen Carter.
Well, it's funny you should mention that. Jalen Carter will most likely be facing T.J. Bass, who is a versatile offensive lineman for Oregon. Granted, I've watched T.J. Bass a couple weeks ago because I'm doing a little piece related to him and related to offensive lineman in the Ravens. So I took a chance to watch him. I think he's incredibly explosive. He has nice strength. He's a little weird with placement. I think he can struggle to, adjust himself to, angled rushes and things like that. But I think overall, if you're looking for explosive, powerful offensive lineman, he's your guy. And I think someone like him, who's basically an immovable object versus an unstoppable force like Jalen Carter, I think it's going to be a very fun matchup because Carter, excellent athleticism, plenty of power. I think he surprisingly has a lot of development in his hands for someone as young as he is. So I think it's gonna be one of the best matchups of the entire weekend. I know people love to watch talk about quarterbacks, receivers having a big game, but there's nothing more fun to me than watch 2 just big dudes in the trenches just go at it for 60 minutes. Right, you have to concentrate on it a little bit more, but it's always fun just kind of keep an eye on that.
I think the second best matchup in this game, and you wrote it on your article at the ATB Network, is edge and outside linebacker Nolan Smith versus Stephen Jones Jr. Why don't you go ahead and talk about that matchup and who you think will win this one?
Well, so first of all, to explain who everybody is in the matchup. Smith, former 5-star prospect, highly talented player. He's a bit undersized. I think he's about 6'2", 6'3", somewhere around 240, 245, something like that. So he's a bit small. He's a bit built more like a Azeez Ojulari was a few years ago. Total projection player, a lot of upside, very athletic, really quick in the short area, has a really good amount of length, so he can kind of use to manipulate, underneath the offensive lineman. And then you get someone like Jones, who is just a big, brawling offensive lineman. He has more experience at guard, but this will be his first year at left tackle. Great. He's played some right tackle, but offensive line, offensive line to tell you that switching from right to left is, insane. It's very difficult to switch. So we'll see how he managed to, to match up against someone who like Nolan Smith, who's a bit more athletic, as opposed to more where he's more power. He's more, on the technical side of things. He's not quite as athletic. I personally think Smith has a really good chance of beating Stephen Jones here, or excuse me, Stephen Moore here. Yeah, Jones. I don't know. I got confused. I got looking at two different names in my article, but anyway, I think it'll be very important. I think Smith has a very good chance of winning this, just based on his athletic traits alone, and I think he's going to take a big step here this year in terms of how he uses his hands.
I think on the offensive side of the ball for Oregon, it's going to come down to, who plays quarterback, number one. Is it Bo Nix? Is it Kenny Dillingham? But if I was head coach Dan Lanning, me personally, I know what Bo Nix can and cannot handle, and I will tailor the offense around him. Now, he's played Georgia 3 times before in his career, and he's 0 for 3. So he's seen a lot of things from it, and why not put your most experienced quarterback out there that has played, an experience and really, really good defense and, cater the offensive skill set, the offensive game plan around it. But do you believe Bo Nix can keep this game close for the Oregon Ducks today?
I think based on his, experience, like you said, I think he has a better chance. I think he has a pretty good chance to keeping it close. Granted, the Georgia's defense, as you and I both know, is no slouch. They boast, 10 million NFL prospects every year. I worry about his weapons. Granted, I'm not as familiar with Oregon's, offensive, weapons as, other people are. But I mean, with that, passing behind that offensive line, I think he stands a pretty good chance. Even though I just said that Nolan Smith might destroy Stephen Jones today. But still, I think, Oregon still has one of the best offensive lines in college football. Like I said, I don't 100% trust his weapons, but I think, he's stepping into a better situation here at Oregon than I think he was at Auburn. Because, I don't think
he has more experience and skill set at Oregon compared to Auburn.
I think it would translate better here.
I think another thing for Oregon, which is going well for them, is their linebacker core and Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, Braden Swinson, and Masai Funa. When you talk about, this Georgia offensive line experience, their veteran groups, and, they're going to help keep JT Daniels upright. But will JT Daniels have another encore of a season, or let's say a good game up against this quartet of linebackers?
What you were talking about Georgia, right? You mean Stetson Bennett?
Stetson Bennett, not JT Daniels. The thing is with Georgia, they always have such a rotation of quarterbacks that I can never, ever get right. But yes, Stetson Bennett is the quarterback for Georgia, not JT Daniels, Stetson Bennett.
I don't blame you for mixing the two up. I don't want to say they're the same quarterback, but
they're the same quarterback.
They're the same quarterback. Sorry, what was the question? We got so sidetracked.
I know. So Oregon has, a healthy quartet of linebackers in Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, Braden Swinson, and Masai Funa. This offensive line for Georgia is experienced. They're veterans. They've played a lot of snaps together. They're going to keep Stetson Bennett upright. But within the short and middle, fields of the game, can he actually slice and dice his way, or will he have to rely on his run game today?
Oh, I think he's got to rely on his run game today. I think he will. I've evaluated, the Oregon defensive line. Brandon Dorless is a great player. DJ Johnson is an ascending player. But I think, given their secondary, because they have, what's his name? Christian Gonzalez, who I've heard many great things about as a defensive back in this class. Granted, they lose guys like Verone McKinley, who was fantastic for them, but I think this is going to be one of those instances where I'm really struggling to believe that Stetson Bennett will be able to carve up this defense. I think what Georgia has in issues with their offensive line, who's really experienced. They got guys like Cedric Van Pran, Broderick Jones who's a really nice player at left tackle. All guys are excellent run blockers, and obviously he has guys like Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton in the backfield who are talented players in their own right. I think this is one of those instances where Bennett kind of just takes a backseat, manages the game, and just lets his running backs do the damage.
So we'll go ahead and see how Bennett does against this Oregon secondary linebacker crew. And overall, this defense overall, we're going to stay in SEC country, and we're going down to Gainesville as the Utah Utes, again the number 7 ranked Utah Utes, up against the Florida Gators. The line has Utah favored by 2.5 points. Over under is 53.5. And I think the biggest name of anybody in this game is Gainesville's own Anthony Richardson. Superb athleticism, good arm, but can't quite deliver on accuracy just yet. He is the face of the team as its quarterback. What have you seen from Anthony Richardson, this summer scouting season and last year that, can he bring his game up to another level this season?
Well, I think that what most people tend to pick out with Anthony Richardson, and granted, I didn't, I mainly focused on edge rushers this summer, so I didn't get a chance to do a deep dive on quarterbacks, unfortunately. But with Richardson, I think that what most people would think out is just, his raw athletic traits and that arm he has. There was a play, I remember watching Florida versus South Florida last year because I was wanting to watch a couple of players from South Florida. And I just remember there was one play where Richardson came, I think it was a touchdown, where he just absolutely just uncorks his arm and just launches good 50 yards down the field. I don't remember the specifics of the play, but I just remember the ball just came up with such great velocity, such great timing and accuracy. Was beautiful. It was probably the most beautiful touchdowns I've ever seen from a quarterback. I think traits like that will help him make very quick throws easy throws against arguably a very talented Utah secondary that has people like Clark Phillips. He has the the personnel to do it. I've always kind of liked Justin Shorter just as a college receiver. Ricky Pearsall is someone I've heard very good things about, and they have Xavier Henderson. So I think he has the talent around to really kind of help balance out his game. And then obviously I think he's gonna have to also use his legs to do some damage too. He's not just a thrower. He can also run the football. I think he's can be really talented in the open field when he wants to. So.
He's going to use his arm. He's going to use his legs. He's going to backflip into the end zone. Any score he can do up against Utah. But as we talk, we transition over to this Utah defense. Linebacker Devin Lloyd, he's gone for sure. Mm-hmm. But former Gator Mohamed Diabate is a good one trying to help the cause. He led the Gators in 63 tackles throughout the season, a couple of fumbles and fumble recoveries as well. The defensive front for, the Utes, they'll be killers in the backfield again. Yes. And the defensive tackles are massive, massive human beings who will come up with the works. You have, do you see this offensive line being overwhelmed by Utah's trench play?
It's a good possibility. I watched Diabate this summer. I really like him. I think he's, got great athleticism working through the tackles. I think he's, pretty cerebral. He's a very cerebral player. There wasn't too many instances where I thought he, over pursued, put himself out of position. And I think, he'll have probably a better chance of being one of the many difference makers. Utah also has Van Fillinger, who's kind of stepping in for Mika Tafua as the head edge rusher there. And I think he's got some talent too. I will say though, the only I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, the only offensive alignment I have any confidence in holding his own in this game for Florida is Osiris Torrance, the transfer from Louisiana. He fouled Billy Napier there, a great player, really good to phone booth. I tweeted a couple weeks ago that he has a picture of that meme that he has that dog in him.
He's got that dog in him.
Just because how he plays, I think he's probably one of the could be one of the better offensive linemen in this class. I think him and himself in a vacuum is going to be fine. I don't trust the rest of them to make a significant impact, especially the tackles, because there's a couple instances last year where Fillinger, along with Tafua, looked great around the edge, a little bit of bend, not super technical with his hands just yet, but I think he has a good chance to make some noise for Utah this season. But yeah, Diabate on his own, I think, could do a lot of damage, especially working against some of the other players. I think how he was used at Florida, he'll get moved around a little bit,
Uh-huh.
which obviously using his athleticism to his advantage. But I'm definitely of the opinion that Utah's defensive front might have a pretty good chance at handling Florida's offensive line here.
So, I mean, it is Billy Napier's, first ever game up against a top 10 team. It's his debut as the Gators coach. He
Yeah.
brings along a few good parts from his Raging Cajun days. And as you said, the offensive lineman. And, it's truly going to be a test today up against, this stout Utah run defense and, just trench play. They have a deep running back situation. And we know Damian Pierce left, but they do have a good solid rotation of running backs, and they might be the deepest position group in the SEC. But on the defensive side of the ball, they still have a pretty good rotation on the defensive front and return top NFL draft prospects in Brenton Cox Jr., Gervin Dexter, and Jason Marshall Jr. But there is one battle, defensive line versus offensive line battle. You did write in your article, and that's Princely Umanmielen versus Braden Daniels. Why don't you go ahead and talk about those two matchups today?
Also, I'm glad you said Princely's last name because I struggle to pronounce that, and I feel guilty about it. Regardless of which, I watched him a little bit. I didn't do a final write up on him just because he was one of a handful of players like with people like Cedric Johnson from Ole Miss, he's kind of just stepping into a larger role this season. He's either he'll either be really great in situations where he blossoms into an incredible player, or else it's just kind of like he has a quiet season and you got to temper expectations a little bit. But I think him, finally getting a bulk of playing time this year, and he's going to be his first game is a great test of his skills going up against Braden Daniels, who's I've seen a lot of people really jump in on as like probably one of the better tackles in the class. He's not getting talked about right now as among the same guys as like Skronsky or
Anthony Voorhees.
Yeah, or Andrew Voorhees.
Voorhees. It is a brand new class. It's going to take some time getting accustomed to these new names, man. Trust me on that.
But no, Daniels is a pretty traitsy tackle. I think if I remember correctly, he's also played a little bit on the interior, if I'm not mistaken. So he's been moved all around, but I think he's considered probably one of the better left tackles. I think he's probably one of the best left tackles in the SEC. If he has a really great season, I think he can probably cement himself as probably one of the top 100, top 100 player in this upcoming class. And kind of the same with with Princely. So it's kind of like two guys who are all potential right now, who could really elevate their stock, kind of just going together. Going after and I think whoever wins this matchup could kind of I don't want to say set the tone because it's corny, but they could actually
set the tone. You set the pace. You need to get off to a hot start, especially on a year-long NFL draft process. I do believe, Nick, that it is important to get off to a fast start because eyes will be watching you, and first impressions are such a big thing that it'll be engraved into your head as you're watching these guys throughout the season. You'll be like, oh yeah, I remember watching his first game. He did amazing. Technique was great. And then, you start to see the entire process of these people. So whether it be for Umanmielen or Braden Daniels, one of those guys is going to show out as well. Before we get on to our final matchup of the day, do want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor, Prize Picks. Our show today is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest, fastest, and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you up against the numbers. Members play the over or under on anywhere between 2 and 5 players of their choice. You can pick from a wide variety of sports, stat types, and even mix and match different sports in one entry. The more picks you correctly predict, the more money you win. Payouts on Prize Picks can be as high as 10 to 15 times the bet. Head over to prizepicks.com and use the promo code 5. That's FIVE. Kind of like Subway's $5 foot long, if you guys remember that back in the day. Again, to get a deposit, match up to $100. Use the code 5. Again, FIVE. So, Nick, I think everybody has their eyes on tonight's game at 7:30. Number 5 Notre Dame versus number 2 Ohio State at the Shoe in Ohio State, prime time, and it is Marcus Freeman's, first regular season game as a head coach
No pressure,
for
Marcus.
the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and he's in Ohio State. Alan, what does this game mean for him tonight?
Well, I mean, we were just talking about setting the tone for your entire season. I think obviously, he's taken over for someone like from someone like Brian Kelly, who's had a historic career at Notre Dame, as a coach. Um, Obviously, he wants to
Always
kind
fell
of
apart in the big games like this. Always fell apart in big
true,
games like
true.
this.
But I think I think that's something that obviously Freeman wants to change. You know, obviously, like you said, Notre Dame, they would crumble. Trust me. I have Notre Dame fans at work, that are constantly complaining about how like Notre Dame can't clinch in big games, and I think that's probably something that Freeman wants to establish, that kind of a changing of the guard. Where they do make a makes a big noise in these big games, actually come out with a win, and maybe establish themselves as a potential dynasty in college football. Granted, Notre Dame's always been consistent. They always win plenty of games. But can they really get over the hump? Can they really take out the top dogs in college football? We'll see. I know they certainly have the talent to do it. Granted, they're starting a new quarterback this season, so which has always
Tyler
been
Buckner. It's also the debut of Tyler Buckner, and I personally think that the Fighting Irish need to establish a running game that is much more effective to support Buckner. But they do have a big injury sustained by their wide receiver Avery Davis. What does this mean for standout tight end Michael Meyer? Is he Michael Meyer? Is he going to see a lot of targets? Is he going to be blocking most of the game? What do you project Michael Meyer to do today?
I think if I think with the receiver without that top receiving talent out there on the field, I think they're probably going to lean very heavily on Michael Mayer. I mean, most young quarterbacks, their comfort their comfort zone, their safety net is their tight end. I know I've heard people say in the past, when you're trying to establish put talent around a young quarterback, make sure he has a good tight end, because a tight end is somebody you can feel comfortable throwing to, especially someone like Mayer, who is the best tight end in the country and is likely tight end one in next year's class. So I think he'll be seeing a ton of targets tonight. I think he'll probably get his fair share of blocks. And I mean, you kind of have to balance out passing and run game if you're gonna be a successful offense. I don't think you should go one too hard one way or the other. This is coming from a Ravens fan, where all we do is run the football. But I mean, they got players like Chris Tyree in the backfield, who's capable running behind an offensive line that has players like Jarrett Patterson, Blake Fisher. I think they couldn't find success at running the football. But having said that, Ohio State's defense, which you and I both know is extremely talented, I think they will have their work cut out for them. But as I said before, I think Marcus Freeman definitely wants to kind of change Notre Dame's reputation of always choking in big games, and really come out tonight with a bang and get a win. It's granted, me personally, as comparing talent to talent, I think Ohio State does have the better chance, especially with their offensive potency. I like a couple players on Notre Dame's defense, like Isaiah Foskey, who we'll probably get to in a second. And they've also brought in Brandon Joseph from Notre Dame, from Northwestern.
On the topic of Brandon Joseph, he feels the loss of Kyle Hamilton as well, and their new defensive coordinator for the Fighting Irish is former Hurricanes head coach Al Golden. I think the biggest test for this defense is, can the secondary hold up against a talented trio of another batch of Buckeyes receiver and Jackson Smith-Jigba, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Emeka Egbuka. What do you think?
I like I said earlier with the offensive line versus D line, I took had the work cut out for them. I mean, when you bring up Ohio State's constant rotation with wide receivers, I constantly think of that Breaking Bad meme of Aaron Paul screaming how he can't keep getting away with it. like Brian Hartline as a coach keeps adding talent after talent and being able to develop these guys to
I want to say former Dolphins wide receiver Brian Hartline.
See, you're gonna kill me for this, but I constantly think of like Brian Hartline with the Browns for some reason. I don't know why I associate him with the Browns. For some, it's
did he
maybe
burn the Ravens once? I'm pretty sure he did. That's probably why
he did. He probably did, man. I probably did. But regardless,
probably did. But again, Brandon Joseph is going to have his work cut out for him. So will Al Golden. But I think all eyes will be on edge rusher Isaiah Foskey, who you think will play up against Paris Johnson Jr. and DeJuan Jones. Why don't you go ahead and talk about what you think is the most important trench matchup of the week?
So Isaiah Foskey, I think from what I can gather from everyone else, granted, he's my current edge too. I have him above Miles Murphy because I'm psychotic. I think he has a chance to this season to really establish himself as a top 3, edge rusher in this class. To me, I think he exemplifies everything you want in a pass rusher. He's incredibly athletic. He's very smart against the run. He has pretty good placement, despite the fact that he is still fairly raw as a hand rusher. He's versatile enough. I've seen instances where Notre Dame puts him off at stack linebacker and asks him to rush from space. They also drop him into coverage. I think he's one of those players you can put him anywhere. I think he can have fun success. That being said, he's definitely gonna have a fun time tonight having to play against probably 2 of the better offensive linemen in the country. I noted in my article that DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson Jr. were probably one of the best tackle duos in all college football, especially Johnson, who's looked at as probably a top 10, top 15 player, top 20 player in the 2023 class, and then DeJuan Jones is kind of like that mid to late day 2 guy who can probably come and be a solid starter. He's a big guy. Both are pretty big guys, and granted, Foskey's small himself, but it's going to be kind of the situation where can he develop? Has he developed enough? Can he use that athleticism to manipulate pressure to stave off run fit. I think, granted, like I said, they move him around a lot. I'm assuming they're going to still keep that even with the new defensive coordinator in place. I think he's going to have he could have a potentially special night, especially if he shows progress. But I also wouldn't be shocked if he gets completely shut down by Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones.
As we move on from the Saints of the North, we go ahead and talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ryan Day's squad returns Heisman hopeful quarterback C.J. Stroud up against a top 5 team in Notre Dame in the first week of college football. Now, look, nobody boasts Ohio State's skill position talent, and it may very well be the reason why they are heavily favored by 16.5 points, with the over-under being 58.5. The Buckeyes featured 3 of the top 12 players in the Heisman odds with, again, quarterback C.J. Stroud, running back Travion Henderson, and wide receiver Jackson Smith-Jigba. Now, the offense was fantastic last season, but the defense was its major problem last season against top teams in Alabama, Michigan, and Oregon, especially throughout the playoffs. Now, Ryan Day brought in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State to shore up their run defense. The biggest key, what I think for the Buckeyes is their linebacker play, not so much along the trenches or edge play. It's going to be their linebacker play from Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, because they have to face Michael Mayer as, that receiving threat from the middle, on the top, and especially in the flats. Do you think, the Buckeyes defense will be stronger this season compared to last season?
I mean, I think they will. I think they have a good chance of kind of building upon what they did last season. Granted, they've returned almost pretty much everyone from their defense, with the exception of guys like Haskell Garrett. But they have an incredible defensive line. Zach Harrison is probably going to be a day 2 player. JT Tuimoloau, I'm going to butcher his name. I'm going to just say JT. Is an exciting young player. They also have Jack Sawyer, who's excited. They have Javante Jean-Baptiste, who's another guy in rotation, and then like you said, Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, who are solid players, in their own right. I watched a little bit of Steel Chambers and Eichenberg while I was watching Taraja Mitchell. I think he's a solid starting linebacker for college. I don't think he's aggressively, he's too athletic, or he's I don't think he's really consistent with stacking his shape. I think he can still hold his own against Michael Mayer. And then obviously their secondary is still pretty much intact. Denzel Brooks, a great player. I'm actually very excited to watch more of him, as well as I'm kind of a big fan of Ronnie Hickman as well. But I think you can't get any worse, especially when you return all of your starters just about. Like I said, I have more confidence in Ohio State's defense, defeating, winning against Notre Dame's offense than I would, Notre Dame's
So, what's the
defense.
score prediction for tonight's big game?
Oh,
man?
God.
Who wins
Oh,
this
God.
game? Who wins this game?
Well, I was teasing my coworker yesterday at Buffalo Wild Wings about, because he's a Notre Dame fan. I told him that Ohio State was going to run rampant, and the worst part is he didn't disagree with me, so that's how cynical he is. I wouldn't, granted, given the talent that Ohio State has, I wouldn't be the least bit shocked if they managed to put up either 35 to 40 points on Notre Dame. I don't particularly think it's going to be
go in the
close.
50s. Is it going to be like a 56-27 type of game for the Buckeyes?
Listen, I wouldn't be shocked if it does. All right, especially if Brandon Joseph cannot tackle tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's where it is, guys. You hear Nick basically stating, and if any Notre Dame fans are watching, Nick is basically saying Brandon Joseph cannot tackle for shit. And the Buckeyes are going to win 56-27. 56-27, that's what Nick Price says. I think Ohio State will win, but I think Marcus Freeman, as you said, he's going to come out with a bang. He knows he's going to be playing Ohio State since, spring training, since conditioning. So I'm pretty sure he has a game plan to limit this Ohio State offense. But what is this Notre Dame offense going to do with Tyler Buchner? Can the run game get up to speed? Again, the offense has to score points. 27, 28, maybe 31 points for the Fighting Irish. I think it may be a win for them in their book offensively. But if they can limit Ohio State's scoring chances, make it a close game like a 35-31, I think Notre Dame may have something to potentially push for the playoffs. Because, again, Ohio State's number 2. Notre Dame is number 5. Maybe, the College Football Playoff Committee, takes a look at this week 1 game and say, it was week 1, first-time head coach up against, a college football powerhouse. We may get them in. We may slide them in. Now, as we go away from talking about these games, we have to talk about some of these prospects, in these week 1 games, and we've seen a couple of them already. Go ahead, big shout out to my guy Jacob Meschel, Finn's Dynasty, as you know him on Instagram, for making this graphic. I have these guys, hashtag Hussam's Hot Shots, players you guys should be watching, in this week's games and throughout the season for the NFL draft prospect. Nick, you've watched a lot of Kayshon Boutte this summer. What are your thoughts on him? Is he wide receiver 1 or is he number 2?
He's number 2 for me. I'm a big Quentin Johnson stan. Oh, big Quentin Johnson fan. Even so, the grade was very close for me. It was like off by maybe a handful of points. He's still a first round talent for me. I'm a big Kayshon Boutte fan. LSU does it it seems like every year they have another guy we're talking about. I'm really excited to see him come back this year. Granted, he has a different quarterback. I believe Jaden Daniels has won the starting job there at LSU, so he's got a different quarterback this year. But I think he does a lot of great things. This route manipulation. He's probably the only wide receiver I've ever seen use a referee to leverage separation down the field. If you don't know what I'm talking about, during the UCLA game last year, he literally used the ref standing in the middle of the field to stave off 2 UCLA defensive backs from touching him, and then he just broke off a humongous touchdown run. It was beautiful. I've never seen anybody do that. It was funny to me. Regardless of which, he's great, has great hands. I think he's actually a more capable blocker than most people realize, which for me, as a Ravens fan, as a team who's very run heavy. If you're a run heavy team, you see that and you're like, cool.
Yeah, you want that, especially
You
like
want
for the
that.
Dolphins. That's what they saw in Texas Tech, former Texas Tech's wide receiver Eric Ezukama, Easy E, as we like to call him. But let's talk about Desean Pace for a moment. We talked about Cincinnati versus Arkansas. Desean Pace is going to be critical up against this game, especially in trying to stop, this Arkansas run game. And I remember the center's name, Ricky Stromberg.
There it is. I know it was one of those type names.
He's going to be going up against him a lot, especially throughout the A gaps. What have you seen from Desean Pace last season and in the scouting process?
So actually, I haven't done like a full, individual breakdown of Pace yet, but he was somebody I always kind of saw in the background when I was watching other players from Cincinnati. Because last year I covered the American Conference, and obviously, Cincinnati was going off last season. Had a lot of great prospects. I thought he was reasonably athletic. He was consistently around the football. I didn't think he was too particularly strong. He's a little bit of a skinnier player. Actually, and there was a couple instances where I almost confused him for a box safety. But regardless of which, I think he's stepping in for someone in Darian Beavers who it's a shame he tore his ACL for the Giants. He's out for the season, unfortunately. I thought, but he's got some pretty big shoes to fill. But I think he has enough natural traits where I think he could do it fairly easily. I believe he's a redshirt sophomore. No, he's a junior, so he is draft eligible.
Desean Pace is actually a third-year junior, and he qualifies to be, in the NFL draft. He can, I believe he can also be called up for the Senior Bowl up in February. February if a couple of people do decline. On the other hand, I don't think a lot of people are talking about Oklahoma's Colin Oliver. This guy,
I can't wait to talk about him. Oh my goodness!
You talk about Will Anderson and Miles Murphy this year. Colin Oliver, he is him. He is going to be that dude in the 2024 draft class. And I think we're talking about him a year too early, but it is never too early to talk about players like this. Listen, Colin Oliver, you're rubbing your hands, Nick. Go ahead, tell everybody what you think.
Listen, Oklahoma State already has a couple of really nice defenders in Brock Martin and Tyler Lacey, but Colin Oliver is something special. Granted, he's a bit of a more compact edge rusher. He's only 6'2". I don't think he's 250. I think he's more like around 230, 240 playing weight. But he came out of the gate last year, had 11 sacks, which if you're a stat sheet guy, it pops right away. But right. Colin Oliver does a lot of nice things on tape. I think he's very extremely.
He had 9 sacks in 2 games.
I thought it was
last season. I forgot which 2 games it was, but I
read
the stat sheet. He had like 9 sacks within a span of 2 games.
Beast. But anyway, Colin Oliver, like I said, he's more of a compact edge rusher. All athlete right now. I didn't see any. I didn't see much when I did see pieces of when I was watching Brock Martin, where he's an elite hand user now. But I think he's just totally went on athleticism and effort. But the potential he has to ascend and 2024 when we get to that point, I think it's great. He already has a sack. I think he got a sack last night.
Yeah, he got a sack last night and 2 tackles up against Central Michigan. 58-44 shootout of game, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to watch too much of that, but I kind of had it on the background. Yeah, Spencer Sanders. If you're a Spencer Sanders fan, the brand is strong.
The brand is strong. Well, Nick, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on, and for the people who are still here watching, make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, and give it a thumbs up so that way we can get more viewers. And of course, here at the 5 Reasons Sports Network, donations are always accepted. Hope you guys have got a lot of food, a lot of beer to watch this.
I got beer.
You got a lot of beer?
I got plenty of beer.
What kind of beer?
I got everything from Rolling Rock to IPAs, and I think my friends left some Bud Light Platinums in my fridge. So
like Nick. Be like Nick right there. Be like Nick right there and stock up your fridge. Guys, listen, college football is back. Next week we will be back and we will be previewing Dolphins versus Patriots. make sure you guys stick around for Fire Reason Sports. As always, guys, fins up, everybody. Thank you.